Welcome to Jamestown Talks, where community meets conversation. Each episode, we sit down with local leaders, doers, and decision makers who are helping shape the future of our town. From public safety and planning to parks and partnerships, we're covering the topics that matter most to Jamestown's residents. Whether you're curious about how town services work, want to meet the people behind the scenes, or just love staying in the loop, this is your front row seat to all things Jamestown. Let's talk about what makes our town thrive. Let's talk Jamestown. In today's episode, we're honored to be joined by two individuals who know Jamestown inside and out, from where we've been to where we're going. First, we have Cookie Billings, former town manager and a foundational leader whose steady hand and deep love for the community helped shape the Jamestown that we know today. Cookie served the town with heart and dedication, guiding it through change and growth while always keeping residents first. And joining her is Matthew Johnson, Jamestown's current town manager. With a forward-thinking approach and a passion for service, Matthew is building on the foundation that Cookie laid, leading the town with a focus on transparency, innovation, and community connection. Together, they'll share stories from the past, insights into the present, and a vision for the future of Jamestown. Let's dive in.
So, can you both introduce yourselves and briefly describe your history with Jamestown?
I can. Mine's probably longer and more interesting. I came to work with Jamestown in, I think, 1981 and was hired as a bookkeeper. They were losing their bookkeeper, and I thought, well, it's the first job. I had majored in accounting, so I was ready to go with that. And I worked for maybe 2.5 years, I think. And then I got another job offer to go to the school system. And I worked for the school system as an internal auditor. And I did that for about 3.5 years. I reported directly to the school board. And then I got a panic call from the town manager and said, please come fill in. We need some help. And we'll pay you whatever, come nights, come weekends, and do that. And so I did and filled in for a while. And then I realized he really wasn't looking for someone to take the job. And I said, I'm tired of working 2 jobs. So he went through the process and, long story short, hired me back as a finance officer for the town of Jamestown. And I believe that was about 1987. So I worked in Jamestown from then on. And as I had anticipated, my responsibilities grew. You know, the more people trust you, the more you do what you know how to do. You get to do different jobs, and it's the end. It's the end of the job description where it says, "and any other duties is assigned." And I was always said yes. So and ended my career as town manager here, and that was the very end, last day of 2010, I believe. So long time, long experience working through and supervising different areas of the town, and finally ending as manager.
So I came in 2006. Cookie hired me as a planner. I think I was the town's first planner. And I'm trying to think, it was June of 2006 when I started. So I came here as a planner and worked in various roles throughout those years, planning director. Did take a 2-year hiatus. I stepped away to take a different job between 2014 and 2016 in Virginia. But was fortunate enough to come back here. Cookie rehired me. And while she was doing an interim town manager stint, and took on the role of assistant manager, sometime around 2020 or thereabouts, and became town manager in 2022. So time flies. It's almost 20 years ago that I started working with the town.
I left out that little 9-month stint. you know, when the former mayor and the current mayor call and say, will you go to lunch with us, Cookie? I can't tell either one of them no. Whatever it is they're going to ask me, I'll have to say yes. And they asked me to come fill in as town manager. I'd been retired a few years, but I did. And much of the staff was still here, which was wonderful. So I forgot. I left that out. I did come back at that point.
I'm trying to remember earlier doing the math, Cookie was the third town manager for the town since it was incorporated in 1947, 48. And I guess I'm sixth full-time manager. They've had a couple interim stints in between.
And we can start with you, Cookie. What drew you to working in local government?
Actually, my oldest brother was already working in planning. He worked in the western part of the state, and that was his lifelong career. But I became very interested in what he was doing, and he told me a lot about it. He's about 6 years older, and I was like, he's a model. I'm really interested in that. So I was going to college, and I thought, well, I want to get a job, so I'm going to major in economics and accounting. I have BS in business. But my minor was in urban geography, and that was very valuable to me to have that. And so that's how it worked out, and I had planned the process. I never had the planning background and used that. I was more interested actually in the administrative management end of it. But having the accounting was a great foot in the door to get in, and I felt like it would be.
So I got involved in local government in a sort of roundabout sort of way. I originally went to school for forestry. I worked in urban forestry for a number of years, which brought me to the Greensboro area. And the economy wasn't so great around 2000, 2001. And I was interested in going back to school to learn a new skill, get my master's degree. And I was under the impression that I wanted to do GIS work all day long and decided that I would go back to UNCG for a master's in geography. Got in school and decided that I really liked the planning side of things. And I was working with the city of Greensboro, and I decided that being in a small town would afford me the opportunity to learn a lot of different things and be involved in all the different aspects of local government. So I was very fortunate to come to Jamestown.
And we were fortunate.
What was your proudest moment serving Jamestown?
Well, I was discussing this with Matt just a little earlier, but and I can't even remember what year it was, but it was when our fire chief was preparing to retire, and we knew we were challenged by having a fire department that was basically volunteer, 1 or 2 paid, but volunteer. And that day was just going away, where you had volunteers who were willing to be ready on the spot. And the current mayor at that time just mentioned to me, wonder if we might have an agreement with another fire department that we could combine forces. And that triggered the process. And so I worked with Vernon Ward, who was the fire chief then, with Pinecroft Sedgefield Fire Department, to really hammer out the first agreement, I think, in the state between departments that would allow us to combine forces, equipment, volunteers, put it all together. Pinecroft Sedgefield would run it. We had a beautiful fire station ready. We had fire equipment, but it allowed us that opportunity to have access to more equipment, better facility, better training, many advantages. And I think getting that in place, and it is in place to this day, was a real accomplishment and something brand new we hadn't done before. So I can think of lots of times where I've been very excited about grants or a project that got built, but this was a long-lasting agreement that took mutual aid ideas even one step further. So I think that was something that I was very proud of. Again, worked with many big projects, the Randleman Dam project and the water treatment plant. That basically was my whole career. That's a long process of building the lake and the dam and the water treatment plant and hammering out the agreement with all the different town managers and county managers that were associated with it. So another big, long project that takes a long time to do. So those things, again, there's some exciting ones that are not quite as large, but those are career moves that you make. So I would say that.
Well, for me, and I'll go back a little step. So throughout all my different jobs, from the time I was 13 and started working all the way up to now. I've tried to learn from others and take the good and the bad. I've had good, great bosses and terrible bosses, and you take little bits and pieces from all of that, right? And it helps to mold you into what you want to be and what I want to give back. And I took a lot of this from Cookie. I wanted to become the town manager because I wanted to help grow our people. I wanted to help others achieve what they wanted to achieve. And there are a lot of different projects over the last 20 years or so that we've done here in town. And I'll probably forget a bunch of them. But one of the things I'm sort of most proud of is that, as we grow as a community, we have made a lot of improvements to the human element here at town. We continue to have probably the best workforce in the Triad. They're incredibly talented folks. They do a tremendous amount of work. And without that dedication, we wouldn't be able to get those projects done that we've all been aware of over the last few years.
What was the biggest change you guys both saw in Jamestown during your years of service?
Well, I went to school and started to work with a pencil. So if that gives you any kind of indication of, at least in my career, the technological changes that took place. When I came to Jamestown, they were reading meters by walking in the neighborhood with a notebook and writing down meter readings, bringing them back to town hall, doing the math, transcribing that, and typing a bill. So shortly after that, I said, there must be a better way. And we began to do the research to get computer systems in and do some things like that. We've become totally accustomed to that. And again, the technology jumps have been tremendous. Matt was a huge help that pushed that even farther for us when I was here working. But really, I would say just in a lifetime career, the technology change and what's available to use was probably the biggest change for me for the work aspect of working for the town of Jamestown.
And technology is big. When I first came, I remember asking Cookie, I said, why does everybody have an inkjet printer on their desk? She was like, well, we got to print stuff. And I was like, there's no network? And she was like, that's a good point. And she was willing to jump right in and get some people in here that helped us wire the building up for network capabilities. And speaking of automatic meter reading, we're in the process right now of going to the next step, which is to have real-time reading where we can, we'll have antennas on each of our water tanks where we can have some redundancy and coverage, but we'll be able to read meters instantly from town hall without having to send people in the field. It's just another step that we're trying to do to make sure that we don't have to add additional costs or additional personnel, which is very expensive over time to continue as we grow to be able to read those effectively, efficiently. And so that's in the process. But technology changes a lot. The town has changed a lot. The environment we work in has changed a lot. So we keep trying to adapt as quickly as possible.
What do you guys think is the hardest part of working in local government?
Ooh, you may have to filter me, but I would look back over a career and say working with elected officials is difficult. That is because often in a small town, people that run for office, they may have a very myopic view. They may have one problem, and they don't know the larger view of the town and the function of all the different departments and the laws and regulations we go with. They just have one thing that's bothering them and they want to run. And oftentimes people who run, it becomes a personality who's popular contest. So you end up with sometimes with elected officials who really have no experience or background in what it takes to run a local government. So, and I would say, I think I have seen huge improvements over the years. Matthew has really implemented a lot of good training programs and opportunities for people who are newly elected to really attend and learn what's going on in local government and the history, and to ask them to respect and understand the institutional memory of the staff people who've been here, what they've worked on and done. So to me, that having people that you report to that simply often don't understand why we're doing something like we're doing can be very difficult, and it requires a lot of diplomacy. You have to remember that, again, we work as a town staff, we work for the community. We don't work for individuals. So we have to understand that. So, but it does take a lot of diplomacy and understanding that people that come into that job where you're reporting to them, they still don't maybe understand fully what you're doing or the history behind what you're doing.
I would say one of the more challenging aspects of local government is dealing with misinformation. The speed of which now is blinding with social media and other outlets. And listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying that social media has become less social and more media. It is becoming an outlet for media for people to go and get news, and I use that in air quotes because it's not always accurate news. Not everybody needs to be published. Most of this is just opinion that is being pushed out there. And so we do the very best we can to provide accurate, good information to the public. We have a newsletter, our website, our own social media sites where we're putting information out. We tend to deal only in facts. We don't get a lot of opinions because we're a local government and we're a source of good information. Trying to dispel people who say that we're not transparent, because we are an incredibly transparent organization, way more so than most of the private businesses that are out there. We're forced to be that way by law, but also the people who work here are good individuals who really care about their community, and they want to see good prevail. So they will spend with a reasonable person, spend time working with them to help them understand what's going on, whether they want to become an elected official or a board member or a committee member, or if they're just an interested citizen. We do draw the line because we are public employees and we work for the entire community, like Cookie said. So we draw the line at, if you're wasting a lot of time, we just say, look, we agree to disagree, we'll move on, but we're not going to spend a lot of time trying to dispel things that you're simply hypotheses that maybe somebody came up with that are untrue. If I had to do that for every citizen in town, we would not have the capacity to do the works that we need to get done.
Kind of going off that, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you think people have about local government and Jamestown?
Well, I think Matt has certainly covered that, and it's grown over the years, where it used to be you just had, when I first came, we didn't even have email. And then we had brave people that would argue with you over email. And so we found out that if you got them in the office, you could help them a lot better than doing the email, doing things like that. So, but again, what I mentioned previously is that we work for the community, and I'm sure Matt has had these circumstances happen where someone's furiously mad over something, and they may or may not come in at first, but if you can usually get them to come in, that works. But I had circumstances where someone would call up and be extraordinarily rude and angry, and if you want to call it blowing off steam, but they're doing it at me, or they're, the language is terrible, and I would usually end the conversation. And I remember doing that one day, and I called the attorney and I said, I shouldn't have to take this. He said, no, you shouldn't. No one has the right to do that, So the idea is that we're people, staff here are doing the work that I know we're trained and experienced to do, and it was often challenging to have people think just because we worked for the town that they could come in and be angry and not treat you appropriately. And I'm sure that's happened to Matt too. He may see that.
Sure, it happens all the time. And it's one of the reasons, and we were covering this in the Citizens Academy, it's one of the reasons that the town typically remains silent when people stand up and just, make false claims or, rattle on about stuff that's untrue. There's no good that comes from getting into a contest with somebody, about that type of thing. I can show you all the facts and figures, but if you refuse to believe, and you have your mind set, then I'm not here to try to convince you otherwise. I can only show you the facts. But those things happen. I'd say 99.9% of folks are very reasonable and they understand. And once they have an explanation, they may be upset at first. And I've dealt with many reasonable people over the years that say, I kind of see your point, and we'll agree to move on, and that's fine. I'm not asking everybody to agree with me by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have the business to run, the business of the town, and we have one of the things we have to do. We're charged with treating everybody equitably, so we strive really hard to be fair and balanced to every single person that walks in, and sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. They wish that they could do something a little different.
Listen, I'll add. I have the cutest little framed note I kept from the days when I was working here, and I won't say the name. It was a gentleman that we went back and forth with for years for different things. He was never happy. He was just you couldn't please him, and it was difficult. And finally, he seemed to really understand what we were doing and why. And the clerk had taken a note down and said on the note, Cookie, and filled his name in, is happy. And I've kept that. I said, wow, that's one that really turned out well. And I know you've told me the same thing. So that is gratifying.
It is very gratifying when you can help somebody understand something that they didn't understand before. Again, which is one of the impetus for the Citizens Academy, is to try to get better information out there, let the citizens know that who they can call for different information. We all have different areas of specialty, but we're here to serve the citizens, and we will work to do our very best to get them the best information, the answers to their questions.
Again, another great program. Matt has really jumped light years away by starting that. And I see all that on social media and newsletters, and I just think that's such a great idea for people to be able to take advantage to take advantage of that. It's absolutely wonderful. I can remember doing programs with youth, and we would take them around to show them different departments. And I think it was a joy that somebody was interested in what everybody was doing. And it gave us an opportunity to showcase what's going on here. We're a small town, but we have the better services often than cities that are much larger than we are. So I speak as a citizen of Jamestown because I've lived here 27 years, and our services are just fantastic. I'm always grateful.
That's another thing that, while it's a point of pride for us as part of our mission statement now that we provide superior services, it is a big challenge because our population is smaller and we still feel like and act like a small town in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. But we're in a major metropolitan area between Greensboro, High Point, and Winston. It's a challenge for hiring and recruiting and retaining our employees. It's also a challenge because of the regulatory environment we live in. We're expected to perform at the same level as, say, the city of Greensboro, and I'll use stormwater as an example. Mm-hmm. They have an entire department let's say 30, 40 employees in the stormwater department. We don't have 40 employees in the entire town, not full-time employees in the entire town. But we're expected to maintain the same level of records and perform the same standards that Greensboro is in that particular department.
Can you guys think of any projects or services we provide that citizens would be surprised at how expensive or complicated they are to get done?
Well, and Matt can speak to what's going on now, but I think oftentimes people did not know where their water came from. And we have so many agreements with with county, with other municipalities, with water service, the Randleman Dam. That was a joint project. How we laid lines to get the water, the best way to do that, combining services with High Point to deliver the water to the system for us, and it was tremendous benefit. So we have quality, secure quality water source. The sewer system, same way. Whoever thinks of that, and how that's funded and how we do it and what's the most efficient way. And for us, that was to combine and partner with, again, with the city of High Point. Talked about combining efforts to improve the service and the ability to serve the citizens with the fire department. Law enforcement, same way. There's an agreement with, I assume, still with the Guilford County Sheriff's Department that has worked beautifully over the years, and they have, at least in my experience when I was here as a manager, very responsive and worked well together with us. So a lot of things that people don't realize would be so cost prohibitive if we were trying to accomplish on our own. And by doing these joint agreements with other municipalities, counties, that has been a tremendous boon. I'll go back to a long way, though, to talk a little bit about the golf course. This was something that was originally a grant, and grants change over the years. Are you snickering behind my back?
I would never.
Well, this was a grant that was back in the 70s, and it's when Jamestown had a great flow of money from the ABC system. It's another story. And they built a beautiful town hall. They curbed and guttered Jamestown. They laid sewer lines. They paid off debt, and it was a tremendous boon for the town. And one of the things they decided to do was to build a golf course, and they got extra funding for that through a grant. But any grant you have, just about any grant you have, are going to have stipulations of how you're going to manage that going forward. And at the time in the 70s, this was restricting the way the land was going to be used. If you were going to build a golf course and playgrounds and whatever on this, it would have to remain like that because you had used federal funding, different sources of money for it. But at the time, and this is very hindsight, but at the time it was a great idea and it was a great boon to the city. And we were known as the smallest town in America to own a golf course. But there was no fund set up to maintain the capital needs of a golf course. And like anything, whether you built a home or sewer lines or water lines or anything, there needs to be savings begin right away when you build something to how you're going to maintain it. We did that with Randleman Dam when construction was going on. But when that happened in the 70s, again, a great idea, a great asset to the town, but it was not put in place to be able to maintain. And that became a problem down the road.
One of the hardest things to communicate to citizenry is the need for underground infrastructure maintenance, because it's underground, you don't see it, and people just kind of forget about it. It's out of sight, out of mind. So definitely underground infrastructure is a challenge, and people don't realize just how expensive it is to maintain that. And this is probably no shock to you, I haven't been involved in the Citizens Academy, but I'll talk about solid waste. I don't think our citizens realize exactly how much it costs for us to provide them that service in comparison to what they pay. Now, currently, they're paying $15 a month for that service. It includes weekly garbage collection, weekly recycling collection, bulk pickup at least once a month. It also includes yard waste pickup all throughout every week. So on Thursdays and Fridays right now, they're picking up yard waste in a continuous cycle around town. And also in the fall, it includes leaf pickup, loose leaf pickup, which is an incredible benefit, especially in some of the older neighborhoods we have in this municipality, where leaves and the trees, they're mature, they're dropping leaves in the fall. That's a great benefit to be able to put those at the curb, and we're making continuous rounds throughout the season, picking those up. I think generally they average about 16 complete rounds around town, and that's between October and February. But to provide that level of service, we're somewhere around $35 per household per month. And, the difference between $15 and $35, that $20, has to be made up somewhere. And currently it's subsidized with tax. I've often said sometimes that you don't necessarily value what you don't pay for. And so sometimes people feel like it's just an included service. But it is expensive for us to provide that level of service. We did go to trash cans, which has been a long time coming. It was a lot of discussion for a number of years. 10, 15 years of whether or not we go to trash cans. I think it's been a very successful program. I take no credit for that. That was all the public services staff. They were able to educate all of the citizenry about how it works, but also for us going forward as we grow, instead of having to add, just like with our meter reading capabilities, instead of having to add a lot of employees and a lot of equipment and a lot of overhead costs, which is very expensive, we're able to keep those costs fairly low and service a larger number of citizens.
So I will say he doesn't want to take credit, but I've watched him lead, and you have to be supporting your staff, and they know that it's safe to go ahead with new ideas, and you're gonna back them up with it. And he may not have his hand on the wheel for that, but he is backing them up. So I've certainly seen that tremendously. And I live here and appreciate tremendously the services we have for that. And because I know what they cost. And I know how reliable they are. And it's just, again, I totally appreciate what Jamestown offers to a citizen. And that's even if I'd never been a town manager, but the experience of that lets me know how much work goes into providing this kind of quality services that we have here in our community. And I'm really proud of the staff that has been here and implemented so many of these absolutely wonderful changes. And change is tough. You have to be strong to stand up to it, because people don't like it. So again, I would say Matt and his staff have done a tremendous job of making some great leaps forward in some of our services, but I'm very pleased with them. I speak as a resident.
We've also been very fortunate that the elected officials were able to support that.
That's always important.
We can come up with all the ideas in the world, but if our elected officials don't support them, we can't implement them. But I'll go back to something that I learned from Cookie many, many years ago. Is she would give you space, to do what you wanted to do, to make mistakes, and I made a number of mistakes, coming along, and that's just human nature. But the best thing is that you learn from those and you adapt and you move on. And so I think we've been able to make some changes that were really big for the town without a lot of problems, because our staff has been really good to work within that space as well.
What do you both think is Jamestown's greatest strength as a community?
No, I would go right behind and say the staffing that we have here and have had for many years. And I think one of the questions you had mentioned previously was, what's your favorite part about the town, or, and again, I would say staff. It's like asking somebody, what's your favorite trip? And it's not the trip, it's the people you're with. And that's how I felt about my time with Jamestown. It was a staff that you could rely on, trust. You have their back, they have your back, and they're all wanting to do a great job. And I say that sincerely. They've been so fortunate to have that kind of experienced, knowledgeable, very educated staff people here. And again, you have to compete with Greensboro, High Point, Guilford County. So we were able to do that. The town council and mayor were able to allow us the ability to compete in pay and benefits, to be able to attract these kind of people. And if you do it right, you can keep them. And that makes a big difference. But to me, that was the joy of working here in town, is having those kind of people around you all the time. And I miss that daily contact. But when you're around 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and goodness sakes, we've got so many that work through the weekends too. That to me is the biggest strength that we have.
I would echo all of that. But I would say when people ask me, especially as we're facing growth, how are we going to maintain our small town charm, our character, our feel? And I've often said this, and especially when we were going through the very arduous process of rezoning for the D.R. Horton project, is this going to change the face of Jamestown? Well, yes, it will change the face of Jamestown. But the way that we, in my opinion, the way that we maintain that small town charm and small town feel is to look at our citizens. The people that live here are what makes Jamestown Jamestown. And the way that we keep Jamestown Jamestown is to try to, and that's playing off a little negativity that was out there for a little while, but it's dismissed now. But the way we keep that is to keep engaging our citizens and to give them an identity. And I think that we do that through continuing to reinvest in our downtown area, music in the park, trying to do activities in our parks, improving our recreation offerings. We're spending quite a few months here completely renovating a park, the playground equipment.
It's beautiful.
Golf course is getting a little bit of a makeover. So, and we've done that thankfully through grant funding. We've been extremely fortunate. We've gotten, I think, $5 or so million over the past 3 or 4 years to be able to do those projects. So it's coming without a cost to citizens other than just the time to get it done. So we couldn't do that without staff, but we also couldn't do it without the citizens' support as well.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Do you see any problems for Jamestown that it's currently facing or that are on the horizon? And how do you think we should address them?
I think Matt might be in a better position to address that than me at this point.
There are always challenges. I think we're under attack at the General Assembly level. All municipalities are. It's not just Jamestown. There's been a real push to take away a lot of our authority as a local jurisdiction. And I don't mean me. I mean our governing body, our town council. The General Assembly is trying to consolidate power at the Raleigh level to dictate what we can and can't do. So we're a very strong bill and rule state, and we can't do anything that the General Assembly doesn't allow us to do. So that is really a big challenge for us. It's one of the reasons that we looked at hiring a lobbyist. Another reason is to find sources of funding for not only a new fire department that we need to renovate, but also Red Miller Park bathrooms and any other major capital projects that we need to fund. Nobody likes to hear the word, your taxes are going to go up. They don't like to hear those words, but it is important. It's a major source of revenue for us. We try to, just as I said, leverage those tax dollars with grant dollars. We try to get as much done, the biggest bang for the buck. We are in a little bit of a challenge here because until our population grows a little bit, Whenever we assess somebody for a penny worth of tax, if your taxes go up 1 penny, the town only receives about $60,000 in revenue. And if you bought a car recently, I can guarantee you that a car is either that or more, depending on what you buy, of course. But it doesn't go as far as it used to. So we are struggling with, keeping up with what goes on at the federal and state level, and trying to give the citizens the best level of service for the best price.
And you can take this question literally or figuratively. What do you think Jamestown needs more of?
I am so happy with Jamestown. It's hard for me to identify that, but I'm going to go back a question and just say, Matt's being very modest about the grant processes that he has been involved in since he came to Jamestown. He really has had the Midas touch, and went out on his own very often to bring something back to me and say, we could do this. If we get this plan in place, we can do this. And has continued that over the years. And I think if people really, if you put that in a calculator now or the computer or use your pencil, you could see the dollars over the years that he's been here that have been absolutely fantastic for the benefit of the entire community. So I see the things he's identified as what we need. I remember we worked together in trying to get the Ren Miller Park property. We had a grant for that together, and it was just a what do they call that weed? It was covered in weed. Kudzu. It was covered in kudzu. The kudzu corner. It was covered in kudzu, and that I said, look, and Matt said, that could be a pocket park. And I was like, sounds great, do it. And he has. So, and certainly he would give credit to much of the staff that's on here to help put things together as well. We had, at the time, a wonderful finance officer. I was so delighted to hire in when I became manager. Just put a team together that was ready to do all those things. So as far as what they need, I think Matt has his eye on that all the time.
Those were challenging times too. Inflation was high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll never forget Cookie told me, she said, we're going to be, as a municipality, we'll be late to enter this and we'll be late to come out of it. Because we're a little bit of a delay in local government as a governmental agency. We don't react quite as quickly as the private markets do, but that's good and bad. So we were a little late getting into the recession. We were a little late coming out of it. And there was a lot of planning work that was done during those years.
Mm-hmm.
We invested a lot of time when mm-hmm. things were kind of slower to plan for the future. And I'm thankful that we did that. The grant management thing has been successfully passed to Rebecca Ashby. She's doing a tremendous job. I think she's gotten something like $2 million in the 2 years or less that she's been here.
Wonderful.
So she's doing pretty good. But what would we need more of? I would ask for people to trust us and to be patient. Mm-hmm. Government doesn't move fast, and there's a reason for that. You wouldn't want them to move fast on things that would impact your lives so dramatically as local government does. So I think there's been a lot of good changes made to Jamestown over the years. I know that change is hard, and I know that it can't stay the way it is. It's going to change one way or another. Mm-hmm. I prefer to think that as staff and as a town, as a council, has a little bit of hand in guiding that. It will turn out a lot better than if we just let it happen by chance.
So, and he's used a great word, guiding it. And that has made the difference in what the Main Street looks like, what new properties that are being built on now, because he's had a hand in guiding it and has asked the citizens to put a hand into it. And I know you're constantly asking for planning help and citizen input and surveys, meetings. And that's critical to being sure you're providing what the community wants.
As the last question, is there anything else that you wish citizens knew or that you could tell them?
That's a difficult one because I feel like we are open and transparent. We have a lot of information available at fingertips nowadays that they can get from us. And we're always willing to meet with people. All I ask is that they just be reasonable. You don't have to agree with us, but to keep an open mind and try to seek to get knowledge and not just to prove their point, because oftentimes there's a lot of bad information that's floating around there, and that's something we work really hard to combat.
Right. And just a visit to town hall and to listen to people that you can trust would make a big difference. I do think people don't realize often that we are to our borders with other cities, large communities. So we all work together with that. And I think we've often been entertained by people who really aren't sure what town they live in because the postal codes are a bit different. So we've had funny things happen where someone came in to say they wanted to run for Jamestown Town Council. And, you know, you ask their address and they actually live in High Point. Again, I wasn't working for the town at this time, but the signs that I noticed, you know, keep Jamestown, Jamestown, and I'd be driving way down the road, and I thought, you're not even in Jamestown. They actually can't vote here, and they don't pay tax. So those are funny things. People just don't realize sometimes just exactly where we are, and what a great job the council and staff have both done with working with the communities where we are right now.
Matt, do you have any resources you want to plug for ways people can find out more information about some of the things you're talking about?
Oh boy. So yes, we maintain a Facebook and Instagram site. We try to put information out there. You can also sign up for text and email alerts from the town. Those tend to be things that are we want to get out information very quickly if there's a road closure or if there's going to be paving. This year we're doing resurfacing of roads, so we're going to put that information out there. We also have our website, town newsletter. You can pick up the phone and call us. I know that's very antiquated. You can email us. But we stand ready. We have a YouTube channel where you can watch all of our major meetings, council, planning board. We don't broadcast every single one, but we try to get all of those regular meetings on there. So there's a number of ways that you can engage with us. We try very, very hard to get information to the citizens in a timely manner, but pick up the phone and call us if you have a question.
So that's just amazing to me. If I will tell you, having come to work here in 1982, to see the progress and the differences in our ability to really communicate well. And that's important for wherever you live, whatever you're doing, is improvements in communication. And certainly this council and staff have taken great advantage of the new opportunities to communicate. And I always know, you know, what's going on. We just read a little bit and I go, oh, that's great. Put that on my calendar. So thank you.
One of the things that Deborah has instituted is coffee with council. So we're going to be doing meetings with our town council members where they can come in and meet with the public and ask questions and engage with them directly.
I saw that. It's a great idea. Great idea. Because 2 at a time you can do.
and I don't know if the audio will pick it up or not, but the door just opened on its own, which means Lydia is present.
Open door policy.
Open door policy.
Can I tell that Lydia story just because over here?
Yeah.
So the railroad was getting ready to what they call double track through Jamestown. And they're a very red tape organization. You can hardly get anything you want out of the railroad. They do what they're going to do. And everybody just typically knows it's a little more difficult to work with them. But they had called me and said, we're going to be double tracking through Jamestown. Okay, this is what's going to happen. And one day I got a call and they said, you know, that old tunnel that you have, it's no longer used as a road, but we're going to fill it in. And I was just talking to this fellow and I said, oh, wait, no, that's the Lydia Tunnel. And I said, we need that tunnel. I said, this is going to sound wild, but I said, you can look this up in North Carolina folklore, and see that we have a ghost in town called Lydia. And that's where she's spotted. We can't let that tunnel go. And he just laughed. And I said, isn't there some other way? And he said, you know, there is another way. I'll do another way. We'll leave that tunnel for you. And that one little conversation left us a tunnel. And in the meantime, Matt had been busy planning for how to do walkways and things like that down to it. But we could have lost that tunnel in one phone call.
100%. And I'll just say, you know, things with government, going back to asking their citizens to be patient with us. You know, that took about 15 years to get from that phone call to having a sidewalk through the tunnel, just because dealing with the railroad takes a lot of time, getting our money and ducks in a row to get it planned.
And the economy has to be right.
It was a chore, but I think it's been a tremendous benefit. I see people walking through there all the time now, so. I'm thankful for that saving Lydia's home.
It's fun to see things over a period of time from the 1980s that have the sidewalks. The one conversation I had, remember when I came back from a meeting I'd had with NCDOT, and I said, they just said I could have $100,000. What can I tell them we need? And we came up with crosswalks and pit heads all the way through the downtown area, because that was street. It worked out. So you see the street things that we've done. Was here when sidewalks were all put in and facades changed. And I remember asking Billy Ragsdale, there was an old gas station that sat on the corner, and it was just so nostalgic. And I would say, I know that's your property, and I know you're going to do something with it. But I said, it's so cute. How can you do something that helps us remember the time of the 40s and 50s when this was a crossroads, and that was the gas station. And sure enough, when they built that, they kept some gas pumps, and that front facade was a bit of how that, I can see it in my mind how it looked at that point. So just sometimes just talking to people, say, what can we preserve that is, you know, historic for Jamestown? And even though it's a 1940s gas station, it was still something that had been here on this corner for a long time. But it looked, you know, the Ren Miller Park and all the improvements at the golf course. I love watching the new playground equipment going in, and that just started with what was probably a swing set in the 70s. So it's been great.
Completely accessible, all types of folks.
That's wonderful.
You know, we're going to have all new bathrooms there. It'll be a great facility. It'll be a dog park. Volleyball courts are moving. The basketball courts are done. And we're waiting to open them up until some of the construction ceases around there. They've put in a natural playground and a walkway there. They've just a lot of this has been done with our own staff. So,
are we going to have a ribbon cutting?
Yes, we'll do something big once we get to that point. I know Scott is interested in opening up portions of that so that the residents can start to use them when it's safe to do so, and then we'll do a bigger ribbon cutting event, hopefully by the fall.
That's great. And again, you've noticed in town, this is, people get used to it. It's always been here. It hasn't always been here, that we had the connectivity to the Bicentennial Trail areas. And again, that goes back a long story when John Frizzell was town manager, and the NCDOT was replacing the bridge on East Fork. And it had to reroute traffic, and it affected our golf course play and people's access. And so it was tough to get through it. And I remember he begged and begged and begged. He said, we're going to need a walking path on this bridge. And he could not get them to do that. And so that we end up with a new vehicle bridge connecting on East Fork, but with no walkway accessible. Then Matt did what?
Well, it's a great story, but I don't want to take any credit for that. The planning work for that had been done years before I even started working here. It was going to be a timber bridge, so it was going to be wooden. And it kind of got shelved, and so we could find a funding mechanism, because it was about a $2 million project. And we had, at that time, we had some new expertise who were working here. Paul was an engineer, and he was like, I think we can do this without using a timber bridge, which would require a tremendous amount of maintenance. And he said, if we did a one span bridge that just spanned that whole area without touching the water, it'd be less impactful to the environment, and it'd be lower maintenance for us. And one of the things that people kind of, gave us a lot of flack about was the fact that the structure, the steel structure, is rusty looking. Well, that, as Paul would explain to people, that rust is a very thin surface layer, and it is protection so that we don't have to go back and continuously paint this, which would be extremely expensive, and it would risk having to be painted over top of our water supply. So he did that very consciously to make sure that it was environmentally sound and very sustainable going forward. But that was a great project, and it just took time.
It's just another example of that, where the idea is there. You hit a bump in the road, and it would have seemed so wonderful if DOT had done that at that time. But the idea was there, and it takes years to put together. But then doors open, money becomes available, and the idea is ready.
We're nothing if not persistent. Some people may say stubborn. Persistent.
Hey. Well, thank you both so much.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cool.